This presentation on solar power for Falmouth was developed by the League of Women Voters of Falmouth Natural Resources Committee. The committee includes Richard Johnson, Kathy Mortensen, Pam Poloni, Rosemary Drager-Carey, Denise Moriali, and Kristen Moritz. We'll start with a brief introduction. Photovoltaic panels are composed of electrodes and thin layers of highly refined silicon of two different types, which create an electric current when exposed to sunlight. An average panel for home use is roughly 65 by 39 inches and may generate up to 250 watts of power. A range of efficiencies is available. Smaller panels are used for smaller applications such as parking meters or traffic signs, and larger panels are used for large energy generating arrays. Solar panels generate a direct current, which must be converted to an alternating current used by most appliances. So in any installation there would be a charge controller and an inverter before it's available for use on the grid. Excess power is sent into the grid for others to use, crediting the system owner. Net metering is the system which governs the connection of solar energy projects to the grid. Residential systems under 10,000 kilowatts are accepted by energy companies in Massachusetts with no limit. Larger systems, however, are evaluated and are subject to caps. The energy company is limited by law to how much energy they can include from sources other than their own generation capabilities. The owner of a solar energy system will receive a credit for energy produced in excess of their needs, which can offset energy drawn from the grid at night or whenever the photovoltaic system does not meet the total energy needs of the building. In Massachusetts, the average home uses 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, and if you use the high efficiency panels, that would be 40 panels needed, with a roof area of approximately 27 by 26, and a south-facing roof tilted at 30 to 36 degrees is ideal. There are many variations on this, however, which work well. Larger businesses, which have great power needs, may need far more power and a larger system. And in these cases, sometimes the photovoltaic array is placed on a rooftop, either a flat rooftop or a slanting rooftop, preferably angled towards the sun. There's one such example on Dillingham Avenue here in Falmouth of Supply, New England, and several of the other larger commercial buildings in the area of downtown also have significant solar panels on their roofs. The angle of the panels is determined by a geographic location and the range of sun angle change through the year. Ideally, they would never cast a shadow on each other. And systems are, for these large-scale buildings, are likely to be larger than 10 kilowatts and subject to net metering. When the roof area is either not well oriented or is not flat or is cut up by dormers, then other alternatives might be needed. Two of these are parking canopies, solar parking canopies, and mobile mounts. Mobile mounts track the sun and adjust to sun angles and are more efficient in collecting energy, although they're more costly, and with moving parts they require more maintenance. They can be very large and they will change in horizontal orientation, so they track the sun during the day, and they also change in their angle from the ground, so they track the sun through the seasons as it rises or falls in relationship to the horizon line. There are also unique systems such as this DAISY solar collector, where the photovoltaic cells are arranged on petals which unfurl in the morning to capture the energy of the sunlight and then close up in the evening to provide less wind resistance. They will also close up when the wind speed gets to be too strong. In Falmouth, we have two well-known examples of solar parking canopies. Kenyon's Market on Route 28 has a series of parking canopies in their lot, which are well screened by trees, existing trees in the end caps and trees along Route 28. We also have the Falmouth Ice Arena, which has enough photovoltaic panels to supply all of its power needs. This is a very large system. The entire building roof is covered, as well as 2 very large parking canopies in the lot. In Bourne, there's also a very large installation at the Upper Cape Tech. This is a single parking canopy that covers almost the entirety of their parking area, including the travel lanes. But parking canopies can be of a variety of scales. They're well suited to domestic use as a carport. When the house may not have an appropriate roof for solar collection, a carport might be much more easily placed. They work well in retail and commercial developments and public parking lots, and the materials of the support system can be wood or steel of different colors and designs, so they can be very appropriately designed to the particular instance of their installation. They lend themselves very well to lighting at night and provide parking that's sheltered from rain, sun, and snow. And they also lend themselves very well to installations for powering electric vehicles. The Falmouth Energy Committee has performed a detailed assessment of town-owned properties and their suitability for solar canopy installation, and the high school and Gus Candy Center are each very strong candidates with their large parking lots and good solar orientation. The high school in particular is a strong candidate because it is the designated shelter should the vineyard ever need to be evacuated in the event of a hurricane or other natural disaster. And the emergency generation system at Falmouth High School is not sufficiently sized to power the building as a shelter, although it is sized to power the building as a high school. We also have a large ground-mounted array in Falmouth at the capped landfill. This is a structure that requires very little support for the panels. They're mounted close to the ground and secured from wind, but they don't have a lot of load-bearing capacity. And one of the conditions of ground-mounted arrays is that it's essential that the vegetation around them be controlled to keep the panels from being shaded. This particular installation is a 4.3 million watt array, and an addition is planned for that. This is also a principal use on this site. It doesn't serve as an accessory to any other permitted use on the property. It's a principal use which is designed to generate power to be sold. In Falmouth, the zoning code is currently silent on solar parking canopies. They have no footprint and require a very simple building permit with no site plan review. Article 7 on the fall town meeting warrant seeks to change this by adding the word structure to the list of elements requiring site plan review. Article 7 does not include any standards which would govern the size or the location of parking canopies, so there is some question of interpretation on how that would be applied. Large commercial ground-mounted solar arrays as primary use are restricted to light industrial C zoning districts. The capped landfill is a very large example of that. There are only 2 other very small portions of light industrial C land in Falmouth which are not large enough for arrays. The Planning Board proposes to create a large solar array overlay district on properties adjacent to the landfill for November town meeting approval, which is Article 8. There are a few other small ground-mounted arrays which exist in Falmouth as accessory uses, such as the Woods Hole Research Grant headquarters. In looking at other zoning alternatives, one possibility would be to open all light industrial districts to parking canopies and ground-mounted solar arrays as primary and secondary uses, or accessory uses. This would allow significant expansion of solar energy generation at the tech park, particularly if the SSA parking facility were to install solar canopies. It's a very large lot, well suited for that application. Opening the light industrial districts to parking canopies and ground-mounted solar arrays is the subject of 2 petition articles before town meeting, Article 9 by Ronald Zweig and Article 10 by Christopher Lynch. One of the other possibilities for these two articles would be the light industrial A district in East Falmouth along 28 near Falmouth Lumber. There's a fair amount of light industrial land behind Falmouth Lumber which is not yet developed, which might be suitable for ground-mounted arrays. The buildings across the street, which are mostly storage or retail buildings, might also be suitable for solar parking canopies or solar installations on roofs. The creation of a solar energy overlay district would be useful, incorporating gravel pits or other industrially developed lands adjacent to the landfill, which are currently zoned agricultural or public use, without changing the underlying zoning designation. So there would not be any instance of spot zoning if the overlay district were to be approved. Article 8 proposes such an overlay district. Among the standards proposed for the overlay district are provisions for a 100-foot front yard no disturbance setback. The side and rear yards would be 35 feet of no disturbance unless the project abuts a residential or agricultural district, in which case the side and rear setbacks would increase to 100 feet. A second standard states that no more than 2 acres of land may be cleared to build the ground-mounted solar array. This is a picture of the proposed overlay district. You can see the hatched areas represent the overlay district, and there's beside it is a recent aerial photograph of the same land. The overlay district is somewhat curious in its selection of parcels for this. One of the curiosities, to our committee at least, is the 3 parcels which are north of Thomas Landers Road, only the middle one of which is included in the overlay district, although the 3 agricultural parcels are currently developed and used as a single property. So we're curious as to why the road frontage property and the rear property were not included in the overlay district. Question is the large public use parcel, which is in pink in the diagram. This is the Falmouth Leaf and Compost Facility, and that property is largely forested. Because it's forested, only the cleared portion of it could be used because of the prohibition on clearing more than 2 acres of forest. There is a large parcel north of that, zoned agricultural, which is currently mostly cleared and should be ideal for solar arrays, but it was not included in the overlay district for some reason. I would point out that all of the properties, with the exception of a few, are abutted by residential or agricultural districts, so the 100-foot setbacks on front, rear, and side yards would apply. The Planning Board has not included a second overlay district, but one to consider might be the area around Palmer Avenue, specifically the SSA parking lots and the Falmouth Hospital parking lot. The SSA parking lot is a long, slender, fully paved area, which is currently in several zoning districts: Business 3, Light Industrial A, General Residential, and the Falmouth Hospital lot is in public use, but both of those sites would be well suited to solar parking canopies. There are precedents from other towns. Barnstable has created a solar overlay district which is centered on the airport and incorporates land zoned for industrial use and other purposes. It's the blue hatched area in this image. A similar overlay district was created at their capped landfill, and in these overlay districts, large-scale ground-mounted solar development is a by right issue. Another precedent, the town of West Tisbury and Martha's Vineyard allows small ground-mounted solar arrays in any district, provided they are not in the front yard or over 12 feet tall. Variances are possible by special permit from the ZBA. The town of Tisbury allows ground-mounted solar arrays in Business 2 zoning districts with site plan review from the Planning Board. They also allow parking canopies, and a prominent example of that is Kronig's Market in Tisbury, which has free electrical vehicle charging stations, as well as the solar power for the market itself. Article 9 on the town warrant proposes that all light industrial districts be open to large ground-mounted solar arrays as principal and accessory uses. This is proposed by Ronald Zweig. No standards were included in this article for design, setbacks, clearing, bonds for decommissioning, etc. And for that reason, the Planning Board does not support the article. They also believe that some of the uses which are specified in light industrial A and B zones may not be compatible with ground-mounted solar arrays. Article 10 requests that ground-mounted solar arrays be allowed as principal uses on agriculturally zoned lots greater than 20 acres in size, as well as light industrial A and B zones, with site plan approval from the Planning Board. This was submitted by Christopher Lynch. Standards are proposed similar to Article 8, with the exception of the stringent setbacks and prohibition on clearing more than 2 acres. This article, if passed, would open more areas to the possibility of ground-mounted solar arrays. The warrant states that Article 10 will not be moved by the petitioner if Article 8 passes as written. A few words on agricultural zoning districts. Well-spaced ground-mounted solar arrays are very compatible with certain types of agriculture, particularly with sheep. They don't work well with cows because cows are too tall, and the expense of building a structure of that height would be too great. Goats like to climb, so they would be on top of the panels. But sheep work very well. They appreciate some of the shade, and then they make use of the grazing around them and keep the vegetation from shading the panel. Light farming activities such as vegetable or truck farming activities are also very compatible, and poultry operations. Another article, Article 11, is proposed by the Planning Board and calls for a moratorium on solar array projects for a period of 1 year until November 2019. The wording is imprecise, it's confusing to applicants. It's not clear whether it applies to residential scale projects or only to larger commercial projects. The intent seems to be to allow time for Planning Board to develop standards for solar parking canopies for approval by a future town meeting, but that was not included in the wording of the article. And in fact, the term solar array is not defined by the article or in the zoning regulations that currently are in effect. We point out that a 1-year delay is very significant given the time it takes to design and permit large projects or commercial projects with parking canopies. And it is unfortunate. It would be unfortunate if this passed. The warrant states that this article will not be moved if Article 7 is passed, and I remind you that Article 7 would bring parking canopies into the purview of site plan review. Grant Walker has submitted a petition Article 12 to town meeting in support of solar power. This would remove the caps on net metering and community solar. The article does not actually propose changes in the Falmouth zoning code, but urges the town to support changes at the state level. It's a non-binding article. Again, I would remind you that net metering caps affect the amount of power from non-utility sources that public utilities can accept. 6% from private sources and 7% from public sources. Once that cap is reached, no new large energy solar installations may be accepted. Removing the caps would be good. The Department of Energy Resources is developing a solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program, the acronym is SMART program, which creates long-term sustainable solar incentive to promote cost-effective solar development in the Commonwealth. Article 12 also urges the government to support this program once it's implemented, to eliminate caps on megawatts included, and to change the proposed way that cap compensation to the solar panel owner is calculated. Community solar is also interesting, and this is a project in which a developer of a solar farm can sell shares to homeowners or businesses, enabling them to earn energy credits without installing solar panels on their sites. The current zoning allows solar farms only at the capped landfill, so community solar is not an option at the moment. But if ground-mounted solar overlay district Article 8 passes, or if Article 10 passes, the amount of land which is open to development as a large energy generating system would become more large, and community solar becomes more possible in Falmouth. There's one very nice example of this in Bourne, near the Bourne Bridge, community solar farm, and in this case the Recreation Authority is a principal client for this energy generation. New technologies are often introduced, so the future is evolving. The Cape Light Compact will conduct free energy audit of your home or business to advise you on energy efficiency and opportunities. Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is also a very excellent resource for information on energy efficiency and solar power, including tax incentives and rebates. And the Solarize Mass is a program that seeks to increase the adoption of small-scale solar energy in participating community through a competitive solicitation process that aggregates homeowner buying power to lower installation prices for participants. I point out that the town would have to apply for this to the Department of Energy Resources before that resource program would be available to Falmouth residents. To recap, Article 7, if passed, will bring solar parking canopies under site plan review by the Planning Board. Article 8, if passed, will open the possibility of additional large ground-mounted solar arrays near the capped landfill. Although the standards may be too stringent in terms of setback and clearing, and the mapped area may be too small, these can be amended by town meeting in the future. Article 9 is flawed in that it lacks the necessary regulatory standards. Article 10, if passed, provides for large ground-mounted solar arrays in light industrial districts as well as in agricultural districts on lots greater than 20 acres, and it provides for appropriate standards for the development of these. Article 11 proposes a moratorium on permits for solar arrays for a period of 1 year. The language of the article is imprecise and confusing and unfortunate. Article 12 is a non-binding recommendation on state policy supporting solar power. It's the League of Women Voters of Falmouth position that solar power should be encouraged in Falmouth. It's a clean, renewable energy resource. The investment payback period for a well-designed residential system, is around 7 years, and panels are typically guaranteed for 25 years. Changes in the zoning code are necessary and should be carefully crafted to facilitate investment in solar energy at a variety of scales: individual homes and businesses, solar parking canopies, ground-mounted solar arrays, and community solar. This is particularly important given the recent UN report on climate change. We need to make active progress and immediate progress in reducing dependence on fossil fuel and strive towards a carbon-neutral future. Solar power is the key tool in this process.